What's up, my friends? How y'all doing today? Welcome to the illusion, or my illusion, I should say. So many different subjects that come to mind whenever I start a video, and it takes me a minute to work out the kinks as far as what my mind wants to speak. Several different ideas that have been going through my head on a daily basis for pretty much all of my life. And once in a while I kind of hone in on a particular subject. It may be through a synchronicity of watching a different video, or often it can just be a situational anxiety or confusion about my own life. But whenever it's something that resonates with other people, or rather someone else says something that resonates with me, I figure it's worth discussion. And one of those things is what we consider to be motivation, I should say. Motivation perhaps isn't the right word, but focus would be a more proper term. We can go from motivational speaker to motivational speaker talking about focus, how you have to get up and do it, you have to know what you want to do, and you have to go full force into it. And sometimes we get a little bit bored, either bored with what we're doing or disinterested, but more often it seems that we're working towards something and we think, this isn't what I want to be working towards any longer. I guess to back up a little, the biggest question that we forget to ask ourselves is not, how do I focus, or how do I become happy or achieve results, but rather, what are you trying to achieve and why? It's amazing how many people work towards, say, being successful in life without ever saying, what do they want to be successful at? But to take it a step further, it's even more amazing that even the folks that know what they want to be successful at often don't ask themselves why. And this isn't just in the college or schooling system. This extends into every realm of human life. Take spirituality, for example, that term, that blanket term that's given to people who don't want to adhere to a strict religious practice, yet don't want to be left out in the cold, not believing anything. So we come up with this idea of, well, I'm spiritual. And I hear that a lot, and I know most people say it meaning well, but in the same results, to the same end, the same question would be, what is the goal of your spirituality? Is it to convince yourself that there's something greater? Is it because you found a particular practice that works in your life? Maybe it would be more like soul, not spirituality, but soulality, because of course this is all semantics, the wording of spirit to me is the spirit of a person, is the spirit, the energy, the essence, rather, to get things done or to accomplish something or to move forward on something, but not the soul, or what we are more afraid of losing than spirit. To give you an example, many people are happy to believe in whatever belief system they may have, but when it comes down to saying, well, what are we really after? What makes you feel comfortable, the most comfortable about these beliefs, is that we know, well, we don't die. We carry on. We continue on. I've shelved the idea of worrying about future lives, or karma in other lives, or becoming a bodhisattva, or an enlightened one, or an ascended master, whatever a person might call it. After careful analysis in my mind of what I'm really seeking out of life, I say, how boring would it be to live in a realm where everyone just understands each other and gets along, and let's say speaks telepathically, for example. That just seems like boring as hell to me, and it doesn't interest me as a human, at least not my current incarnation, if you will. So I guess I'm bringing that up to say it's not a matter of whether or not there's a heaven or a hell, or whether we reincarnate, or who we become, what we become afterwards. That's getting too wrapped up in questions that are irrelevant at this point in time. So the focus at this point in time, in my opinion, in my life, is to figure out how to lead the most rewarding, rich, and fulfilled life that I can. Not just for myself, but for those around me. And there's a lot of talk of going back into your mind and saying, you know in your heart exactly what you need, and don't listen to other people. I completely disagree with that, because we do use the views of others around us and our peers to determine whether what we think and what we believe is actually useful. So it's fine if we want to go on and think whatever we want. You know, we can put ourselves in our little box. If that makes us comfortable, so be it. But really, I feel like as a species, as a species in general, we have to yearn for a better future. I see a future where things have changed. I can see a future where humans have got over many of our disagreements and misunderstandings. But at the same time, I cannot see a utopian world where everything is just fine, where no one needs any protection and everyone's out for the good of the people. There's always going to be a corrupted element in society. That is just nature. That's how nature evolves. And even if we did have this great utopian society where everyone got along, there's bound to be a disaster which is going to leave people hungry. And when people are hungry, they'll do anything to feed themselves, including harming other people. So looking at the human aspect of who we are disgusts a lot of people. They think, look at us, we've evolved from these creatures, and we need to get rid of this primal mind. We need to get rid of this, these desires we have, and these ideas of being fulfilled in this life, and put it more into our karma or the next life, if that's what works for folks. But I look at things a little bit differently, in the sense that it's not about selfishness, nor is it about worrying about the afterlife or what may come in the future, but a balance of the two. But understanding that ego, our ego, something that's been dismantled for so long now, something that we have been told is something we need to overcome. It's the most absurd thing. When you look at Buddhism or some of the Eastern philosophies that dealt with ego and talked about removing the ego, you find that a lot of the folks who believed that we needed to overcome ego were people who were uncomfortable with themselves. In other words, there's a portion of ourselves that we are always going to dislike, and instead of saying, well, this is something we need to overcome as individuals, we blame the ego. We say, oh, well, that's just the human ego. That's just my, my primal mind. I really need to overcome that. But this is the same mind that keeps us alive in this 3D reality. This is the same mind that allows you to jump out of the way when you hear a loud sound to avoid death, or the certain senses that we have around. We've got our normal 5 senses everyone speaks about, but we've got several more. We have a vestibular system which helps us to keep balance, and that could be considered a sense. It's a fascinating thing. The more I learn about ancient cultures and compare them to modern discoveries and try to find some sort of a balance between the two, the more complicated it becomes. So it's not about reaching into our souls and feeling what we know to be true. As much as I believe that our hearts can tell us a lot more than our minds, I also know that our hearts can lie and our hearts can fool us if we're trying to get caught up in a particular defense of a way of thinking. I've seen it before. I've seen people who are just in their heart completely convinced that what they know about something is right, and been able to confirm that no, indeed, that's mistaken, especially when it's relating to another person. For example, if a person says, this is what God wants, you can't prove or disprove that. But if a person says, I know what you're thinking, you can say, no, that's actually not what I'm thinking. Unfortunately, science, for a lot of people, has become the enemy. And it's because it takes all the fun out of many of the beliefs we want to have. But science itself is not a religion. It's not a dogma. There's just dogma within it. And there are so many different people and so many different mindsets out there, I guess if I were to wrap this up, since it's kind of a ramble, I just really wanted to say that we need to get over ourselves. And we need to get over what we think is right and wrong, as far as when half of the population is arguing with the other half of the population, or even when the ratios are even somewhat equal, it says something. It says either all those people are totally deluded by propaganda or nonsense, or, which in some cases is true, or that maybe there is more to it. Because when something is absurd to the point where, if something is so absurd that it's obvious, then not even propaganda will convince people of it. They'll say, no, that's nonsense. I know what's right. But when we talk about these other little issues, involving beliefs and spirit, or, laws, nation laws, political parties, people don't know what to think. And so we tend to follow other groups. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as we're thinking for ourselves. It's kind of like you have to start somewhere. It's to compare it this way, school isn't going to teach you how to be a good person. School isn't going to teach you anything. It depends on whether you go to school and listen. It's going to have to do with the teachers, the type of school you have, the type of person that you are, all these different things. But nobody's out there creating their own school for themselves, because you have to live on a platform where you can talk with other people. You could create your own language. You could write your own alphabet. You could say, I'm an individual and I think for myself. I have all my own reality. But if you can't interact with those around you to say, hey, how do you feel about this? Then, we'll never get really the full picture. So I'm hoping for a future where I'm hoping that what we're going through right now is not just a world, but even just as individual nations, as cities, states, and as families, that we're growing up, and that we're moving out of this idea that we know what's true about the roots of our existence or the future. I think that it's up to us to stop pretending that Jesus is going to return and make everything okay, or the fact that the world's going to get hit by a comet and be wiped out and it won't matter, or how the sun's going to eventually go supernova, so we're all going to die off anyway in billions of years. It's a cop-out. It's that people don't want to take action for what we have to do right now. And people are afraid to speak their minds on really controversial topics and issues because they don't want to be looked on by their family and friends as idiots, or even if they know they're right, that's even worse. If you know you're right and you don't want to say it because you don't want to stir the pot, then it's just perpetuating this complete nonsense that we all have to face daily. And social media has brought that to light so much. But I feel like it's the beginning of something good. And so I guess that would be the only real message I wanted to get across, was that as much as it seems like the world is falling apart right now, as much as it seems like we're killing each other off and things are getting worse and worse and worse, if you look at what's really going on within individual communities, groups, people, you find that people are willing to change a lot more than we thought, and that a very small part of the population is ultra stubborn and very outspoken, because they're confused and they don't want to lose their beliefs. They don't want to lose what they think is real and right for, say, the country. Those who defend their points the most adamantly are often either completely right or completely confused. So it's really hard to know the difference. If somebody really stands up for something and says, yes, I believe we should arm teachers in schools because that's going to save the kids, a person can say, wait a minute, does that make sense? Instead of reacting instantly and saying no or yes, think it through, look at the statistics and say, what do we know? And, have rational discourse over things like that. But I probably shouldn't have used that example. It's kind of a hot button topic right now, but it's what's on my mind. Been thinking about these things a lot lately. So, it really is kind of a good versus evil thing, but not in the, spiritual sense, but rather what we in our hearts feel is right for the future. The kids of today are much more connected than we ever were, and it's going to continue that way. I feel like the connections that we're making kind of expose a lot of the bullshit out there, but they also expose a lot of the true hearts that we have for each other, the true feelings, to show that we're not just all selfish robots out trying to get ahead, get a job, and feed our own family and say screw everybody else, but that we're individuals that care about one another. And then I care about people even on my YouTube channel that I've never even met, because I know that they're real people. You're real people. All of us are people. We forget that even the most vile, corrupt-sounding person, even the biggest troll, somewhere in their heart, there's something missing that could be fixed, perhaps, or perhaps not, through interaction with others, and with a true discourse, and a true analysis of the self. And this is what it means to conquer the ego. It's not about forgetting the self. It's about allowing yourself to realize that you will be more respected if you're willing to change your views and alter your thoughts as you receive new information than if you stand up and say, no, you're wrong. So, we'll see where we go from here as a species. But it's good to be able to discuss these things with all of you in the meantime, before the apocalypse hits. Get your zombie vests. Talk to you later.